Welcome to the Book Fair podcast. My name is Anthony, and this week we have the newest releases for young readers and headlines for June 24th, 2026. Coming this Friday, we will have an interview with Brittany Cooper, author of the recently released picture book, Mama Says I'm Fine. Let's begin by looking at the new releases for this week, starting with Together for Mama by Pooja, Makhijani, and illustrated by Nadia Alam. With frank sensitivity, Makhijani and Alam explore a mother's postpartum depression through the eyes of a new big sister. When her parents return from the hospital with baby Maya in tow, older sister Asha calls out excitedly, and subsequent pictures show the child sitting solo with the infant. But a page turn contrasts Asha's feelings of happiness with her mother's seeming sadness, and vignettes show the parent withdrawn from family life. When Mama confesses to Papa, "I can't do this," Papa calls extended family, grandmothers Daddy and Nani, for help. Color functions as a narrative element across the fine-lined pencil and digital drawings of the South Asian family. Yellow, orange, and spring green attend moments of love and connections, while grays and purples reflect Mama's depression. It's a compassionate, fully non-judgmental portrait of loving and supportive care. An author's note concludes, and this book is recommended for ages 5 to 8. Next is Shorelines by Ruth Ennis, featuring illustrations by Natalia O'Hara. In a dark and disquieting verse novel, Irish poet Ennis melds elements of Anderson's The Little Mermaid with warnings about human cruelty, ocean exploitation, and anti-fat bias. Soon after her twin sister is found dead, trapped in a fishing net, grieving mermaid Miriam, youngest of the Sea King's 5 daughters, makes her coming-of-age journey to the water's surface without her twin. Always fascinated by the lure of life beyond the sea, Miriam is initially enchanted by her observations of humans, and even rescues a drowning prince. Convinced she can reason with him about the escalating overfishing that is destroying the merfolk's food supply, she returns underwater to request a potion from her aunt, the sea witch Railton, that will give her a human body when on land. Once ashore, Miriam is shocked to find that the colossal body she has always been fiercely proud of is seen as repulsive to humans. Shortly thereafter, she is imprisoned in the prince's dungeon, released daily only to serve as entertainment for and endure abuse from the prince and his court. Lyrical language helps mitigate horrific events, while occasional shape poems add visual interest. Softly rendered black and white spot sketches from O'Hara depicting sea life are sprinkled throughout a bleak, if beautifully told, tale. This book is recommended for ages 12 and up. And the final title for this week is The Lovers, the Liars, and Me by DeAndra Davis. Davis traces a Jamaican-American teen's attempts to learn more about her estranged mother in this emotionally charged novel. Valedictorian Jalea Powell, 17, has struggled with feelings of abandonment since her mother deserted her at age 4. The teen copes by pulling a tarot card daily from the deck her mom left behind. Upon receiving a mysterious, damaged letter that she believes is from her mother, Jalea travels to Jamaica to stay with her aunt, uncle, and cousin, Siobhan, certain that her mom has been living on the island. Though Siobhan is initially cold, he soon welcomes her into his circle, comprising of locals Andre, Dion, and India, who assist Jalea in uncovering her mother's whereabouts. As the cousins reconnect, Siobhan confides in Jalea about his love for Dion and his fear around how his conservative community will react to him coming out as gay. Simultaneously, Jalea develops feelings for both India and Andrea. Rhythmic language renders Jalia's candid first-person narration as she perceptively confronts questions of sexuality and cultural identity. The evenly paced narrative provides ample room for readers to empathize and connect with the easy-to-root for characters, making for a satisfying and introspective offering. This book is recommended for ages 14 and up. That covers the new releases for this week. Next, we'll be taking a look at some news. But first, if you appreciate the work being done on the Book Fair podcast, there are a number of ways to show your support. First, you can like, comment, or follow wherever you are currently listening to help push the show out to new listeners. Second, you can follow the podcast on Blue Sky, Instagram, and TikTok at Book Fair Pod. You can also go to patreon.com/thebookfair to find episodes posted early as well as links to news sources used throughout the show. Following on Patreon is free and there are no posts hidden behind a paywall. Of course, the best way to help the Book Fair podcast is simply to share it with a friend, an educator, or a young reader in your life. Now, on with the show. Next, let's take a look at our headlines for this week, starting in the state of Washington, where a Board of Trustees president has outwardly listed, quote, desired outcomes. The president of Timberland Regional Library Board of Trustees is facing backlash from the local community after TRL employees captured pictures of a list labeled as desired outcomes at the library's Administrative Service Center. The center is not open to the general public but is used. The list was brought into a meeting by board president Brian Mitke, who has confirmed he brought the document into a conversation with TRL interim executive director Andrea Heisel. The full list is available online and I'll be reading it directly. Quote, desired outcomes. No sexuality for kids. Materials about sex, sexual, and gender orientation moved from children and youth sections to adult section. No sexuality in children's activities. Make libraries places of unity, not division. A neutral place that taxpayers can be proud to support, that parents can be excited to visit. Make libraries safe places of respite, not hotbeds of activism. Nonpartisan and neutral. Earn back people's trust. Open and geared toward safety for families, not activists and homeless. No rainbow and activist displays. Monthly celebrations aren't uniting, they are dividing. Be beige, not rainbow. No dividing kids from parents, no suggesting they hide things from them. Libraries aren't places to teach about sexuality, and librarians aren't therapists. Just get back to being a library. You're alienating people. They're saying no. End quote. The document was first posted to Reddit, and by the following day there were 156 comments, mostly criticizing the document and its author. One particular point commenters pointed to was the line, quote, open and geared toward safety for families, not activists and homeless, end quote. Commenters pointed out that libraries should not be hostile to homeless individuals. The inclusion of removing rainbows, calling them activist displays, and wanting to be beige is a clear reference to LGBTQ+ individuals, and particularly Pride Month. In 2023, the Timberland Regional Library Board was pushing for a book rating system that would have labeled all LGBTQ+ material, as well as anatomy books, as inappropriate for children. The rating system never went into effect, and based on the reaction so far to these goals, the community is not siding with Board President Brian Mitke. Our next story comes from Utah, where a school district granted access to sensitive information to a volunteer that is a frequent advocate for book bans. Davis School District officials are firmly asserting that there was no breach of security when Brooke Stevens volunteered at Reading Elementary earlier this year. A spokesperson said, quote, Miss Stevens was one of 3 volunteers who were helping the school librarian catalog a large number of books. Each was supervised by the school librarian during the time they were assisting the librarian. There was no breach of student records. End quote. While Brooke Stevens has a prominent role in local conservative group Utah Parents United and herself submitted 20 challenges to library materials in Davis School District, where her children attend, the concern in this story comes from the fact that the system that volunteers had access to also lists names and addresses of students and the books they had checked out. A representative from the American Library Association said while having volunteers assist with these kinds of tasks are common, library records are considered private information in 48 states, including Utah. For context, Hawaii and Kentucky are the only 2 states that do not explicitly list records as private information, but they are not publicly available either. The ALA recommends volunteers undergo a sensitivity training and are informed on privacy and security policies. The district claims that an investigation was conducted and no issue was found. However, when asked by the Salt Lake City Tribune for details on the investigation or whether volunteers were trained on privacy law, Davis School District issued no response. The Tribune also reached out to Stevens herself about the incident and if she saw any private information. She simply responded with "nothing happened" before ending the call. No further responses have been given through email from Stevens. A parent complaint that led to this story breaking alleges that Stevens was given access via a librarian's login, giving her full access to library records. The district's only response so far has been passing off responsibility to the State Board of Education. The Utah Board of Education has launched an internal investigation, which has not concluded at this time. And now finishing on more positive news, with one student in Florida taking a stance against book bans. In Jacksonville, Florida, Maya Smith, a student attending Duval County Public Schools, has created a documentary about the effects and trends of book bans in the United States. Coming from Florida, Maya undoubtedly has insight into the battle happening within schools and public libraries. The brief documentary, Words on Trial, includes interviews with students, librarians, and developmental specialists discussing the importance of access to diverse materials in their schools and libraries. This documentary largely covers topics mentioned here on the Book Fair podcast, but the significance is being able to hear the impact directly from the students themselves. If this podcast has given any hope to listeners, please, please, please follow the link to Maya's documentary in the description. Voices of young people matter greatly in this discourse. Even if change happens on the administrative and legislative level, requiring voters to enact change, having someone like Maya giving a face and context to the effects of book bans means so much. Again, since this week's episode is shorter, check in the description for a link to Words on Trial. Give it a like and a share, and I'll talk at you next time.